Thank you again for sharing with us the art of embracing tech marketing in the modern era. Up next, we have an exciting speaker session on the topic, the role of data in business-to-business marketing, privacy, personalization, and performance. This session will be delivered by Morgan Horn, who is the CEO and founder of Evergreen Digital Marketing. The stage is all yours, Ms. Horn.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is my mic on? Is it on? You good? If not, I can talk really, really, really loud. So, no, I'm totally good. I can hear myself now. This has completely been redesigned, I think, because it is PDF. We've exported it to PowerPoint, but I like this much better than originally what I sent in. So, a bit of preface prior to this this PowerPoint deck. Yesterday at the networking session, I enjoyed a couple glasses of wine, and then I got a call a bit later in the afternoon saying I had a speaking engagement that now I was attending and speaking at. So this morning, I put together this lovely presentation in regards to privacy, personalization, and what that does from a B2B marketing context. So bear with me because, to be honest, I put these together this morning, and I'm definitely gonna go off topic because privacy is really a multifaceted organization, and to be honest, a bit about myself. I've worked in Europe. Originally, I was working at a law firm in Europe, and I was managing their marketing facilities where I learned about GDPR. And to be honest, more like GDPR was hammered into me. And then from here, I've also worked with organizations in the US now, as my organization, my agency is based in the US. And really, privacy now is much more kind of a social dilemma, as there is CCPA, but there's really not as much regulation around this, and this kind of becomes more so of a social movement, more so than kind of what I have here, which is more so about regulation. So I'm just gonna kick this off a bit of a context, like I said, especially now from a B2B standpoint with data is becoming personalized online, and with COVID, which was the paneling session I sat yesterday, essentially what's happening now is, after COVID era, so many B2B organizations, especially what I noticed from professional services, are also running revenue online as well as offline. And online is actually becoming more preferred for a lot of individuals, especially with the increase in e-commerce for B2B organizations as well. So what we're seeing a lot now is you can essentially measure your CPA much more than you could if you were attending conferences, having dinners, meeting people face to face. There are so many more trackable interactions that we can now have with our potential clients and customers. On top of that, in today's context, data privacy is becoming such a major issue and so multifaceted. Like I said, it's becoming a social movement here as well as in Europe, but equally the regulations around this are just going to become more and more popular. If you can see on my little note there, 90% believe that the ways their data is treated reflects their relationship and how they're treated with customers. I don't know if anybody is familiar with, say like the recent data breach and the recent settlement that Facebook had to deal with in the EU. So, I think what I'm saying is, we are gonna have, our brand perceptions are gonna entirely change once we learn how organizations are treating our data and what they're actually doing with it. So, a bit more about myself. Like I said, I've worked in Europe as well as I work here. Again, had GDPR very much hammered into me from the early bits of my career. So what I've essentially done with my organization is I do pride myself and pride my clients on being privacy first, and essentially consulting and working with them to build data structures that correspond with their digital marketing, but also do respect the amount of information that they're collecting on their prospecting clients, customers, and potential recruits. But with that, without compromising anything, as well as ensuring that compliance, as well as the performance of it all. Because I do think all of those things are actually possible. You can still personalize your content without, collecting a ridiculous amount of information, as our panelists just discussed, the amount of information that we're putting forward and essentially is then being stored on us. Which is a funny topic as well, because originally when I put this deck together this morning, I was like, oh, this is straightforward. I have 10 slides. And now I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't know what I've gotten myself into, because this is continuing to grow, and it's continuing to be inevitable that privacy laws are going to continue to be enforced, involved, and our organizations need to get ahead of it if they want to make these changes, and ultimately it's going to start to change the perception of your brands. So here we go. This is obviously a balancing act at this point with the amount of information that we're storing, as well as, personally, I am actually going to go into this. Is anybody familiar with the concept of a data debt? So the concept of a data debt is actually what is happening at the moment, especially I would say is a larger dilemma in the US at this point with the amount of tracking that some of these organizations are doing, as well as the amount of information, like, our previous panel just discussed the amount of information you're putting in to say, look for health insurance, and what's being done with this data. And so a data debt is essentially when a company is collecting so much information about an organization to essentially personalize the experience, and then it's not actually being used. So then this data is just being put away, it's being stored, and it actually has no beneficial context for the business. So look, I do believe personalization is obviously really important as well. I am a digital marketing agency. I do serve ads. I do digital advertising. It is really important. However, I would say, especially in the US, after the change of the iOS 14.5 update a couple of years ago, I think a lot of businesses are actually starting to realize you can still achieve personalization with the right tools and equally with the right intent. And so that's what I really have here. It is a balancing act to an extent. However, I do think they're both possible, and you can still perform without knowing, absolutely everything, when somebody decides to leave for work and, when they tuck their kids into bed at night. I do think it's absolutely possible. So this is originally kind of the preface that I originally had was about regulations, especially GDPR and CCPA. However, even more so now, how many people in this room have an iPhone? A lot of you. It's just like, it's over like 80% of the phone market here. It's unreal. I have an Android, so I have a different experience, but look, equally, with the iOS 14.5 update, so many of us started to learn about, well, what are our apps actually doing and how much information are they actually collecting about us? Like, my parents are well into their 60s, and they were like searching and Googling and YouTubing about, well, what are these apps doing? What information are they collecting, and should I be allowing them to ultimately utilize my data? And so I think from that has been a massive cultural movement that's been started years before about data privacy, what we're doing with individuals' data, and especially I would say, this is maybe from a B2C standpoint, but I do think there are a lot of B2B organizations that are still collecting a large amount of information, especially if you are an entrepreneur and you're working with larger individuals and products, they collect a lot of information that they, try to reutilize for personalization standpoints. However, again, as the technical term of a data debt, we don't actually know that. So into personalization, obviously personalization is a massive, it's just an important thing as we move forward, especially with account-based marketing, as well as personalization in regards to, I'm sure everybody in this room gets an email with their first name, and you're like, wait a second, how do you know that? But it's becoming more and more popular. People are essentially capable now of starting to create funnels that are personalized to their specific audiences based on maybe the lead information that you've shared. And increasingly, it's continuing to be effective. So even 99% of marketers say personalization is effective, as well as 80% of consumers continue to like more and more personalization. Even now with digital advertising, personalized digital ads are becoming more and more popular. However, the way that these are working now, because of the iOS 14.5 update and increasingly as well as GDPR and CCPA, a lot of these organizations are starting to shift to make sure it is less likely of a data breach. And with that, a lot of these large organizations now have data breach liability insurance, all of these things to essentially ensure that there is not going to be a breach of data any further. And Meta has completely revamped their advertising platform, as well as Google. GA4 has essentially become more user-friendly, but equally it's limiting the liability of any data breaches moving forward. So here are some steps, and look, again, I originally came up with like 10 steps, but this is a PowerPoint deck, and I only have 17 more minutes. So I tried to break it down to 3. And what that is essentially saying is like, look, if you have data structures, if you've implemented data structures at this point, maybe this is the time to consider auditing those data structures, making sure that everything is put in place that is compliant to GDPR and CCPA. Other things is if you work for an organization, a lot of organizations already have data liability policies in place, and if it's not something that you think would be effective, I would I would definitely recommend considering implementing one for your own organization to make sure any of your B2B leads or information that you have about individuals is becoming compliant, is essentially stored correctly, it's not being exchanged with individuals outside those parties. Just in regards to those things, it's, I think it's just obviously really important, because what's happening now is, again, our perceptions of how people are treating our data is entirely based now looking at a brand and perceiving whether that brand is actually reliable or not. So it could really be between you getting a sale and you not, if you are not handling your data correctly. And that's only going to become more and more true as the shift in privacy moves forward. So again, understanding compliance and reviewing those regulations. I think also reviewing what type of technologies that you have in place. So again, if you were looking at a target audience that mostly uses iPhones for something around the lines of an app, I think you need to think about what is that going to mean for your business, because you are probably, I would say, I think the last time I looked it up, about like 90% people deny tracking on those applications. So you're gonna have to definitely consider this within your strategy. Another thing is investing in technologies, such as now there's a lot of privacy AI tools, as well as automations that you can utilize to create personalization. For example, really big thing now is the movement away from cookies. And with that, we're all utilizing APIs. And with APIs, it's essentially making it more secure for you to move your data across servers. And equally with that, you can utilize the right tools to, either integrate an API or integrate some of your, I would say, like your GA4 account. They're all making this as easy as possible so that there's not data that's being potentially moved or leaked in any sort of way. So there are a lot of really great privacy tools that you can utilize, as well as privacy AI tools that will help you essentially anonymize that data, which is what's really important. And that's the main thing with GDPR, is making sure that your data is anonymous and that it's generalized. And when I say generalized, I don't mean like you're not going to know what somebody's customer journey is if that is something that you've already had planned out. It's more so along the lines of, you're not going to know that Fred Armisen in New York City that lives in Brooklyn and that walks his dog at like 5 p.m. Just a generalization as well, but you understand that there's a bit more about the focus on what your actual customer journey is and making sure that that is mapped out, which can help you understand a bit more about that. That's not necessarily about the details of that individual, but that can still be utilized within personalization strategies. Again, going back to making sure that your customer journey is actually mapped out and understood on what each sort of personalization strategy you're going to utilize. So for example, if I have a lead form on my website and I ask people what the size of their business is and they give me that information, knowing that I have a personalized journey already set out in regards to what that person is going to experience after they leave my website. So for example, something along the lines of, I've had a dental clinic fill out a form and it has 5 people, and they filled it out on my website. Well, now I know that actually I can talk to that individual about what dental strategies you can be utilizing as a small business, because they're not going to have a very large budget. In utilizing those, we can still create measurements that actually we can measure effectiveness. And this also goes back to the importance of A and B testing. When we're sitting on these organizations and we're not looking at maybe the hyper focus of their personal information, but more so that generalized customer journey, testing is going to be more important than ever. So it's building these personalized strategies and also being able to test them that's really ultimately going to lead us to finding what's actually working for us versus just relying on the amount of data context that maybe we originally had. I think this isn't more so an opportunity, this is an opportunity for personalization to pivot. I don't think it's an opportunity for personalization to end. We've ultimately are going to start to hit a wall with privacy and just assume that, well, then this is over with, but that's not true. We need to take a separate direction about how we're actually going to personalize and give people that one-on-one interaction, because that's ultimately what's going to lead to those sales further on. And equally, it's something that's becoming more and more in demand. The other thing is human marketing, is utilizing your account managers to create more one-to-one interactions with individuals, and sharing that information is going to become more and more valuable, especially with AI. The amount of chat box that we talk to now, the amount of customer service that's automated. Utilizing automation is great, because I think it can lead you up to a certain point to have a conversation with a real human, but utilizing entirely automated context isn't going to be highly effective. It's going to be the individuals that you have sitting behind the desks at your organization. So again, a couple tools, AI, I'm sure we've all heard it a million times at this event this past weekend, and the event's not even over yet. But ultimately, I mean, utilizing AI to make sure that you're utilizing privacy effectively, as well as automating data anonymization, as well as segmenting your audiences. This can allow you to then set up those customer journeys that are going to be the most effective for your content strategy. It also still allow you to view behaviors within a more confined context. So again, you're not leaking that data, and there's no essential potential breach of data being utilized. Again, automation. I do think automation is going to help personalization moving forward, as well as understanding what our context, the context of our customer journeys is going to be. This is, again, going to reduce the risk of human error and enable everything to work, I would say, at a scale. I would say the third thing, actually, I don't have up here that does these two things actually incredible is utilizing the value of a CRM. And especially with a sale, and especially with the idea of utilizing an automating experience to an extent, and then a human-based experience, utilizing the value of a CRM is really what's going to help us move forward to continue to personalize our experiences, as well as make them relatively private. So again, ultimately, if you utilize all these things, you're going to see that increase in performance. You're going to see that increase in your brand perception as well, with trust and loyalty, as well as ultimately you'll see conversions move forward. I would say what's going to initially happen is you're actually going to see more engagement around some of this, and I think also encouraging the fact that you are being transparent with how individuals' data is being utilized can actually be really effective. And on top of that, you're going to, again, enhance the customer experience, because even this last panel originally discussed what's happening at the moment. So many people are looking for what is authenticity. And as a B2B business, it's absolutely the same, if not more important, to be authentic and be unique as an organization. So with that, I do think, again, managing your customer journeys, as well as making sure your data structures are put together, that it's also anonymizing some of that data, but you're still going to be allowed to review a lot of your customer segments, and just making sure you have that customer segment and that journey, customized, and you understand what the segment's going to need. There's still a lot of really great tools that you can utilize to create those and see those conversions move forward, as well as increase your retention and build that brand loyalty that you're actually looking for. So future predictions. Again, like I said at the top of this, and I don't mean this to sound like the world is ending or it's on fire, but we are going to see more data privacy laws come into place, or we're going to see more people concerned about how their data is actually being managed. I do think there are also going to be more organizations, because data liability is becoming such a big issue, that people are going to ensure that organizations that they're working with on a B2B standpoint are essentially following regulations and with their data and how they're managing their data. For example, I think the Better Business Bureau ensures that you are following CCPA guidelines prior to accepting an organization into them. Equally, again, the appeal of data transparency, as I previously noted, just making sure that you're obviously being transparent how you're managing people's data, I think can be really helpful. And equally, I think it builds that trust, again, with that brand loyalty. Otherwise, I do think we're going to see more of a rise in tech, as well as AI guidance around how to manage privacy, how to best follow privacy practices, and how we can continue to essentially either follow these regulations or best optimize this data so that we can continue to build trust within our customers. So this is my information, but I have a little bit of time left. Does anybody have any questions? No? Yes. Yeah?
Do you see a possibility of a digital bill of rights being passed?
That's a really good question. I wouldn't say, I mean, the idea and concept of a Bill of Rights would be like a tsunami of like legalization or, regulations being put into place. I do think it's going to be much more incremental than that, especially with some of these regulations. I think it's going to come in strides. I don't think it's going to be something that's necessarily placed in, essentially enforced all at once.
Mm-hmm. But giving me that right, saying that all of my digital footprint belongs to me, and you have to ask my permission to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the discussion that's definitely being had now more in the States than ever because of the iOS 14.5 update. And so many individuals then started to wonder, I mean, we're all in marketing, we understand what people are tracking on the back end of our phones. That was no news to us, as well as what cookies are on the back end of a website. For a lot of normal consumers, that was not necessarily open information that they were aware of. So I do think now more than ever there is a massive shift with individuals and being concerned about their privacy. And I mean, even the iPhone, for example, I'm half based out of Europe. The iPhone does not have a large market in Europe. However, what they've done now because of the iOS 14.5 update is it's a major unique selling point for them. And it's become essentially helped them build their market share in Europe because people are so concerned about their privacy and they value their privacy as well. That is becoming more of like a social shift. And I think the last panel actually touched on a really good point as well where they talked about regulations. By the time some regulations are put in place, the social shift has gone much further than that. So this is something we're seeing at the moment, but I do think by the point that regulations are put in place, this will be something much larger than that for like most people's individuals' opinions on data and how their data is being handled. Great, guys. Well, thank you so much. If you have any other questions, let me know.